Boris Johnson is under pressure, and so is the system that holds Britain's politicians to account, in part because of this moment in December.
All guidance was followed completely during Number 10.
That wasn't true, and the opposition has repeatedly returned to this.
The Ministerial Code says that ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. Does the Prime Minister believe that applies to him?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course.
But Boris Johnson says he didn't knowingly mislead. This is his defence.
It did not occur to me then or subsequently that a gathering in the Cabinet room just before a vital meeting on COVID strategy could amount to a breach of the rules.
And whether the Prime Minister knew the rules had been broken is central to this story, because here's the Ministerial Code. It sets out the standards of conduct that are expected, and it reads, ministers who knowingly mislead Parliament will be expected to offer their resignation. The Scottish National Party thinks it applies here.
There is a clear-cut case that this Prime Minister has misled Parliament, and that in itself is a resignation matter.
The case being that it's not credible that Mr Johnson had no idea that rules were being broken in Number 10, given he works and lives there, and that he set the rules. But there's no smoking gun here, no explicit evidence that Boris Johnson knew. The Conservative MP Tom Hunt has told GB News that it's impossible to prove that he deliberately misled Parliament. Without explicit evidence, it is hard to know someone's mind. And so the system relies on what the historian Peter Hennessy calls the good chap theory of government, that there's a shared sense of the right thing to do, of when a line has been crossed. But each leader has their own view of what constitutes a resigning matter. In June last year, The Sun revealed that Health Secretary Matt Hancock had broken COVID rules. Soon after, Number 10 said the Prime Minister has accepted the Health Secretary's apology and considers the matter closed. Asked if Mr Johnson had full confidence in Matt Hancock, the spokesperson said yes. The next day, Mr Hancock's resignation had been accepted. And now, almost a year on, Boris Johnson doesn't think he should resign for breaking the rules. And this is his position on what was said in the Commons.
Did the Prime Minister deliberately mislead the House? Could I ask the Prime Minister, did you deliberately mislead the House at the dispatch box?
No, Mr. Speaker.
The opposition disagrees. And this is where it gets complicated, because here's the Ministerial Code again. Any minister expected to offer their resignation has to do so to the Prime Minister. That's right, the current system requires Mr Johnson to reach a conclusion on whether he's broken the code and if he should resign. That's a problem, according to Peter Hennessy.
I don't think the framers of the Ministerial Code and its predecessor documents could have imagined that the wrong un would be the Prime Minister himself.
Mr Johnson would strongly dispute being a wrong un, but we know Mr Johnson is willing to use his power to decide how this code is implemented. Back in 2020, it was Home Secretary Priti Patel who was the focus. We'd heard concerns about her treatment of colleagues.
I have received allegations that her conduct has included shouting and swearing, belittling people, making unreasonable and repeated demands.
After this, an internal investigation by the Prime Minister's own ethics advisor drew this conclusion, that her behaviour had been in breach of the Ministerial Code, even if unintentionally. The investigation said the code had been broken. In response, Downing Street said, having considered Sir Alex's advice and weighing up all the factors, the Prime Minister's judgment is that the Ministerial Code was not breached. After that, Priti Patel remained in her job. The ethics advisor resigned, saying, the way the allegations have been dismissed, I think, has raised questions about the confidence that the public can have in the impact and effectiveness of the code. Those questions remain, and there are others too, because here's another part of the Ministerial Code. It says ministers have an overarching duty to comply with the law. Bear that in mind as we listen to this.
Does the Prime Minister actually accept that he broke the law?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I've been absolutely clear that I humbly accept what the police have said.
Mr Johnson broke the law. According to the code, he has an overarching duty to comply with the law. But he doesn't accept he broke the Ministerial Code, which begs the question, can this system adequately test Mr Johnson's conclusion? The Prime Minister sees it this way.
I'm very keen for every possible form of scrutiny, and if the House of Commons can do, I think, whatever it wants to do. But all I would say is I don't think that that should happen until the investigation is completed.
The police are continuing their work, and then there's senior civil servant Sue Gray. She's investigating 16 gatherings, but the police investigation is producing fines. Sue Gray will produce a report. Neither can decide the political outcome, neither will rule on whether Parliament was misled. And this constitutional expert argues that leads you to one place.
If the Prime Minister isn't policing the code, who can do so? And you can't look to the civil service to do that. You can't look to judges to do that. You can't look to the Queen to do it. You can really only look to Parliament.
And today in the House of Commons, the opposition parties made their move, calling for a new parliamentary investigation.
The motion I've tabled seeks to defend the simple principle that honesty, integrity and telling the truth matter in our politics.
Now, in this case, the government didn't oppose the motion, so it passed. But such is the system, the Prime Minister's MPs, with their majority, could have blocked it had they chosen. Not this time, though, so the investigation will start once the police have finished. But whatever it finds, it can't decide what to do with its findings. That, again, is for the House of Commons, which is why, as the BBC's Chris Mason puts it, it's Conservative MPs who have Boris Johnson's career in their hands. And one of them has already drawn this conclusion.
I'm a Christian myself, I'm a Catholic, and this is a Christian country. And forgiveness is at the core of what we believe and what this country believes. The Prime Minister has offered his heartfelt apology.
Most of Mr Johnson's MPs are standing by him. They're taking their lead from him, which is why this former senior civil servant describes the ministerial code this way.
The system depends on the Prime Minister standing up for standards in public life and for taking action when his or her ministers breach those standards.
Boris Johnson says he does stand up for them, but the system's vulnerability is when there's no shared notion of what those standards are or how they're enforced. And here's historian Peter Hennessy again with his description of the current moment.
I think we're in the most severe constitutional crisis involving a Prime Minister that I can remember. Boris Johnson has broken the law, misled Parliament, and has in effect shredded the ministerial code, which is a crucial part of the spinal cord of the Constitution.
Boris Johnson denies doing any such thing. He denies misleading Parliament. And crucially, unless his MPs turn against him, fundamentally, it's for him to decide. And there's one other dimension to this too. The constitutional expert, Professor Vernon Bogdanor, argues in our strange constitution, all depends on public feeling. Well, a new YouGov poll suggests 57% of the public say Johnson should resign. That may or may not translate into the local elections next month. That may change the political dynamics. We'll see. But whatever the voters' verdict, it won't change a truth about how Britain holds its leaders to account. That if a Prime Minister is thought to have knowingly misled Parliament, ultimately it will be the Prime Minister and his own MPs who decide if that's the case.